Sailors and boaters of Reddit, what's the most amazing or unexplainable thing you've seen at sea? When I was younger and on a family holiday in Gran Canaria, we went on a boat trip around the island. Seemed like a good way to waste the day in the sun. We were on a medium-sized catamaran, and between the two hulls there was a kind of netting that people were sitting on. It was a pretty chill time and 12-year-old me loved sitting on it and looking out at the sea. Then we hear the crew yell something. They'd spotted dolphins. Cool. So we get up. Can see them jumping a bit off the distance and parallel to how we're traveling. Then we notice they're getting closer and closer. I go back to the netting, thinking I'll be able to see one as it passes beneath the boat. I look down at just the wrong moment as this complete derp of a dolphin decide that was the perfect time to jump. When he was underneath the boat and headbutts me, he lands back in the water and the school moves on. But my day is ruined by a bloody nose and black eye from getting a Glasgow kiss by ducking flipper. Edit. And now this is my top rated comment. Who would have thought a traumatic experience that scared me off the sea for years would reap karma? Fata Morgana. I'm Reddit illiterate and can't share the link that I want to, but it's a mirage where you see a ship upside down. It's creepy as dark. You'll see the ship sailing along, and then you see it upside down, floating above the ocean. I've witnessed this and really wish I could share the Wikipedia link. I saw a penguin swimming around in the Gulf of Mexico. Friend invited me fishing offshore when I went to visit him. While out there, he pointed out the funny black and white bird in the distance that would occasionally dive down. Proclaimed it a penguin. I calmly explained there is zero, zilch, no way that was a penguin. I explained currents, geography, water temperature, etc. We floated closer to it. It was a penguin. We snapped a few pics of it. Back at home, a trip to Wikipedia told us it was Phoniscus demersus, an African penguin visiting the Gulf of Mexico. Go figure. I was en route to northern Japan after the terrible tsunami happened for disaster relief, Marines. Anyway, I had stepped outside to a catwalk for a smoke after not seeing the sun for a few days. Turns out that it was extremely foggy and snowing, which I had never thought about. The ship was basically reduced to a crawl. It was all very silent and quite peaceful. After chain smoking for 10-15 minutes I started to hear things hitting the ship. Had trouble seeing at first, but once I saw the roof of a house and a crib float by I realized where we were. Ran back to my living area to grab some friends. We all get back out there and silently observe people's lives floating by us. Not super crazy or bizarre, but it's something I'll never forget. Spent the next week and a half dealing with crazy weather shifts doing my part in the cleanup effort. For those who want to read about it, here, Operation Tomodachi. I like this comment from a previous thread like this. Mortani have family who sailed around the world. One day in the North Atlantic, their sailboat was going over some gigantic swells. They didn't have brakes at the top, so it was safe. But the boat was rising and falling way beyond the neutral. At the bottom of a trough my uncle looked up to see the sun behind a wave and the silhouette of a whale inside, above him. We were boating past a beach when we saw this whale breach in incredibly shallow water, and I swear to God I heard it call out to her family. It was a thunderous sound. I was quite shocked to discover that it was in fact just a fat tourist calling to her son. An acquaintance in high school had sailed around the world with his parents starting when he was in elementary school. Took them 6 or 7 years. So he was in high school when they got back. He had lots of stories of interesting things seen. One I remember was another sailor with a pet monkey. The guy kept a couple chickens for eggs on the boat too. The monkey viewed the chickens as his pets and often held them, stroking them. One chicken stopped laying and the sailor decided to eat it. He took the chicken to his cutting board in the cockpit and cut its head off. The monkey, watching this, screamed in terror, then scrambled to the top of the sailboat mast. It stayed up there for 3 days until thirst drove it down. After that the monkey would run to the top of the mast if the man ever got his cooking knives out. I was a beautiful day off the coast of Juneau, Alaska, and we were hobby fishing for salmon when we caught a small fish. We noticed a large bald eagle soaring overhead and decided to try and throw the fish to the eagle to give him an easy lunch. My father-in-law threw the fish up in the air and the eagle swooped down, grabbing it out of the air before it hit the water. I was pretty stunned. The eagle was so ready to catch a fish flying through the air, but it seems his reflexes were pretty eagle-like. Mum's partner is fisherman. A couple of things that came to mind. The incredible amount of great white shark encounters they have out at sea, obviously attracted by the bait or something. Stories of being circled and harassed by sharks for sometimes up to days, in at least 1 or 2 occasions resulting in them having to go back in. Freak waves. Sadly, the amount of fishermen killed by freak waves is too high. Imagine Mother Nature just unleashing a huge wave out of nowhere that obliterates a fishing boat, killing those on board. He's participated in many searches for bodies and those of lost fishermen at sea, including hauling numerous bodies on board and liaising with police in the searches. My favorite though, was something he actually saw on land while out at sea. On an incredibly remote and rugged part of Tasmania's west coast, the crew noticed what appeared to be a dog on the beach. As they got closer, they noticed it was sniffing around in some seaweed and walking a bit differently to a dog. As they continued to get closer, they also noticed something else. It had what appeared to be the outline of stripes along its back half. Yes, still to this day they believe they saw an extinct Tasmanian tiger or thylacine. Regular sightings are still reported in Tasmania, and many local fishermen have also reported seeing them in that particular area. Edit. Spelling. I was walking along the beach with my girlfriend when all of a sudden I hear someone scream, "Is anyone here a marine biologist?" Being a marine biologist myself, I ran over to the commotion. What I saw was a beached whale with a golf ball stuck in its blowhole. I removed the golf ball and me and the beachgoers pushed the whale back into the ocean. The sea was angry that day, my friends. Edit. You uncultured swine need to watch some Seinfeld. Most amazing is the non-sound of wind. When you're on shore, wind rustles through the trees, moves wind chimes, makes birds chirp, etc. Way offshore none of those sounds exist. It's very eerie to feel the wind but have it make no noise. Just a force that moves across your skin and then gently leaves without a sound. After spending a few months at sea on deployment, the most incredible thing I saw was 4s turning into solid 9s. I've done some sailing on a 134 double-masted steel brigantine. Finally a question I can answer. We were sailing through an area of high biological productivity in the North Atlantic one night. My shipmate was on bow watch. I was on the quarterdeck assisting the mate with whatever needed to be done. I suddenly heard my shipmate yelling my name and saying I needed to come up to the bow as quickly as I could. When I got up there, I saw 7 or 8 bottlenose dolphins swimming through bioluminescent water right under the bow of our boat. Every inch of them glowed green. It was like something out of a dream. They looked like glow-in-the-dark torpedoes. When we looked out across the horizon, we saw green spots everywhere. There must have been close to 30 dolphins swimming around. We got almost the entire crew out of bed to come watch. That's definitely something I'll remember for the rest of my life. I was canoeing on the coast of Florida and my wife said, "Let's paddle up to that log." We did. Right before we reached it, the log snorted heavily and swam away. Scared the shit out of me. My wife laughed because she knew it was a manatee and knew what would happen. She grew up in Florida. Me and my good friend, Jay Foster, experienced a sunfish for the first time while enjoying a nice day on Boston Harbor a few weeks ago. I was quite perplexed by it. Saw a group of spotted eagle rays jumping out of the water, about 6 of them all getting a good 3 feet of airtime. Surprising to see a majestic sea flip-flap generating enough power to do that. While on a crossing from the Bahamas to Charleston, South Carolina, I was on watch in the middle of the night and saw a strange bright orange light rising up from the horizon until it flickered out. Couldn't figure out what it was, but when we got to shore I saw in the newspaper there was a rocket launch in Florida. More than 2. A guy in Florida gave the boat I was on coordinates for somewhere between the Turks and Caicos Banks and Hispaniola, saying there was something mind-blowing out there and we had to check it. I guess he told the captain what it was, but he wanted to keep it a surprise. When we reached the coordinates, which required some motoring, we found a source of constant bubbling. We didn't really understand what it was until the captain threw a bucket over the side and filled it up from the bubbling water, and drank out of it. It was a pillar of fresh water coming from some vent in the ocean floor. Bizarre. Comment in a similar thread a while back. From you Mad Trav. For me, the memory that sticks with me was when I first realized just how powerful the sea is. I was working on a boat in Japan. On my way back into port after a 4-week swing, just sat in my cabin one evening watching a film on my laptop when every now and again I noticed a bright flash from behind me. I turned around just in time to glance out of my porthole as a bolt of lightning light up the sea and capture a snapshot of an enormous wave just about to break over the side of the boat, which started getting tossed around like a toy. The boat's about 120 meters lower. Certainly gave me the shivers anyway, Not amazing in a good way, but on the flight deck during flight ops, business as usual, launching planes and dodging jet blast. All of a sudden the air boss calls out to get ready for emergency landing. In like 3.5 seconds the landing area was completely clear. Before I could even realize what was said, well, the jet didn't make it to landing. I watched a $60 million F-18 just go into the ocean. The pilots ejected and needed to get pulled out of the water, of course. It all happened so fast I would almost swear that the helicopter pilots literally appeared out of thin air, spun the ditch up and were hovering over the water with a rescue swimmer roping out in an instant. This all happened in what seemed like less than 5 minutes. I was in total shock and sick to my stomach because nobody immediately knew whether or not the pilots were okay. They were. Both had quite a few broken bones. The same jet I watched take off minutes before was deep sixed. Ran 2000-ish. Indian Ocean on watch maybe 0200. Pitch black except for stars and quiet apart from the diesels. I notice a humming sound. Sorta halfway between hearing it and feeling it. This goes on for a while, but all of a sudden it got a lot more intense and suddenly I notice a glow way under the water. I thought it was bioluminescence on a shark or whale or something, but it kept floating up and suddenly just shot off maybe half a naut mile, taking the hum with it in about 1 or 2 seconds. Nothing can move that quick underwater. I reported it and it was logged, but nothing came off it. Heard stories from shipmates about the same thing happening, but the glow goes into the air. Dunno about that, but what I saw I have no explanation for. Also, equator crossings. It gets weird. Neither of those things. But when I went to Thailand, me and my friends rented a boat. Every time we passed ice fishing we would throw them beer. Eventually they said they should give something back. They threw fish to us. It tasted nice when we cooked it. Became a regular thing there on and made many friends. Some of whom I have on Facebook. Going back there in a month. I almost hit a sea turtle the size of a mattress off the coast of Washington. It suddenly appeared and I threw the engine in reverse and swerved hard to port, throwing passengers off their seats. I looked out the starboard window as I went by and seen 2 eyes staring at me on a head the size of a basketball. Long ago, was in the US Coast Guard, stationed at an unnamed station. It was a weekend and I had operations duty. Okay, this is more amusing than amazing, so don't get your hopes up too high. I received a call on a telephone landline that someone was poaching lobsters on the north side of the base. I did the normal thing, which was to press the UGA alert and loudspeak boat crew to operations. Waited and no one came in. I stood up and looked out at our pier and the 30-footer was missing. I sent someone running to the north side and yes, it was our boat crew poaching the lobsters. Amazing. Dropping sails and sliding into a mass of dolphins. About 20-30 of them. Jumping out all around us. Swimming all around. If it wasn't for the concentration of jellyfish, Chesapeake Bay, I'd consider jumping in with them. It's one thing to see them on a nature show. It's another thing to watch them round up and fish in person. They'd break off into subgroups 3-5 and they were simply everywhere. Freshwater boater here. I typically hunt and fish the Arkansas River. Where I'm at, it's a huge body of water. One day while fishing in some lazy backwater off the Arkansas, my GF and I, heard a faint, very faint raised voice. We stopped and listened intently. The wind and noises of the water lapping against the side of the boat made it impossible to make out what they were saying, but it sounded serious. So we stowed the fishing gear and made towards the sound. When we came out of the backwater area towards the main channel, we could see a capsized boat with 2 people clinging to it, desperately screaming for help. A pretty dangerous situation. They appeared to have no life vests on and the river was carrying them away. We made our way over and helped the couple into our boat and made for shore so I could go back and retrieve the boat. Another boater saw what was happening and made his way to the capsized boat. The couple were older and clearly exhausted from their ordeal. From talking with them, they told me they had hit a sandbar going top speed, was only a 25 horsepower motor and a 16-foot boat, and when the boat suddenly stopped, water swamped over the stern and turned the boat over. After dropping the couple off on the bank with my GF to rest, I helped the other boat tow the boat to the bank. When we got it there, we managed to get enough of the boat on the bank so we could turn it over and begin dewatering it. Once it was seaworthy again, I towed it back to the boat ramp for them and they were able to get it back on a trailer, and they left after thanking us profusely. TLDR helped an old couple after their boat capsized. Yacht delivery leg across the Gulf of Mexico heading from the Dry Tortugas to Key West when there was a series of whap, whap, whap noises above us. Looked up in time to see a bunch of flying fish hitting the sail, just as the first of them started falling to and flopping all over the deck. There was another post about weirded people experience when out in the wilderness. One user told a story about sailing on the Chesapeake when a storm hit. A squall, I guess. The sea was confused, choppy water with no real wave direction. After it passed and he looked over the side and saw a creature with a lizard-like face and a couple human-shaped arms come up out of the water, look right at him and then dive back down. He didn't say anything to the other crew on the boat. Then a little while later, one of the other crew said something to the effect of, "Did anyone else see that weird creature that popped up out of the water? I'd try to search and link it for you, but you have a better chance of seeing a mermaid than getting Reddit search to work." My friend went undesignated, no official job, for the Navy and had to clean and sweep an entire deck. They didn't give him a dustpan, and when he asked where the dirt should go, they said to just make do. He picked it up and ate it. Not sure if that counts as what you're asking for. I'm late, but it's a cool story. I was off the coast of somewhere for about 25 days on a cruiser. It was somewhere Pacific, but they wouldn't tell us. I guess it was China. Not important. We were pretty delirious after being out a long time without port. It was about 0230 and we were cleaning stuff. Bored, all of a sudden the ship starts jerking and making all sorts of noise. An alarm I have never heard comes on and people on the intercom say something to the effect of, "Stay inside the ship." Naturally we didn't listen and went out back with our searchlights to see what happened. We opened the door and the smell was like walking to a rotten tuna factory. A factory that makes rotten tuna. You could literally taste the whale carcass. Apparently the ship's radar was in up or something and missed the giant whale we ran into. There were whale bits all behind us and the next morning it was bird heaven. It not unexplainable, but it is really cool. I was out on Lake Michigan early on in the summer. It was a really warm day but the water was really cold still. Much like a hot day on tarmac, this created mirages. The only difference was that the mirages were inverted since the air was much warmer than the water. So if you looked at a boat in the distance or the Chicago skyline across the lake, you would see a mirror image of the object in the air above the actual object. It also made the sand dunes in the distance look like a sheer cliff that was painted in watercolor. It was really trippy looking at first. Not unexplainable but awesome nonetheless. I was sailing on a heavy lift ship around the world as a cadet. The sheer amount of stars on a clear night. There is nothing like it. The sheer vastness and beauty of the starry night sky just silences you. Illuminescent algae in the bow wave is a really cool thing to see. All the wildlife you encounter. Schools of countless amounts of dolphins playing in the bow wave. Humpback whales jumping out of the water. Giant sunfish. Humping turtles. Flying fish. Boobies painting the deck white. And countless more. Crossing the equator is special. A dead cow that probably fell off a transport ship. We were in open water. I worked on a cruise ship for 7 months as a youth staff taking care of kids while the parents party it up. At certain parts of the day we close the playroom to the older kids and just let parents with their children that are under 2 come in. This woman comes to the gate with a double stroller with 2 of the ugliest looking babies I have ever seen in my life. She asks if she can come in with her babies. Of course. I oblige, but something seems a little off. She takes the babies out of the stroller and puts them on the blanket that we have toys placed upon in the middle of the room. It is then that I realize what was so strange about these babies. They were dolls. This woman was taking pictures of them with the toys and pretending they were alive, names and all. I just looked over at my co-worker and she's giving me the same look of shock and horror that I had on my face. We had no clue what to do or say. News spread quickly to other crew member on the ship about her. Apparently she bought gold bracelets for them at the jewelry shop on board. That woman is by far the most amazing and strangest thing I have ever witnessed at sea. I was on the Ronald Reagan during the Fukushima Daihatsu disaster, tsunami, subsequent reactor debris, and watched people's entire lives float by in the middle of the ocean. Toys, roofs of houses, entire trees, etc. Everything you could think was washed out to sea and was floating by our ship. Why? One I can answer. I was 3 or 4 days out from Antigua on a rowboat. 3 AM, very little cloud cover and only a bit of moon. I'm in my own head thinking about food and on deck alone and rowing when I realize something is watching me off port side. So I turn my head to the right, rowing backwards remember, and whatever was watching me ducks its head underwater. Yes, underwater. And yes, a ducking head. Whatever it was had been watching for maybe a minute or so. I only caught a glimpse of what it was and to this day have no idea. It looked like a human-sized head. Black pupilless eyes. No nose or ears. Bleached white and wrinkly skin. Think albino seal. Scared the it out of me so much so that I stopped rowing. I've looked everywhere to figure out what it was and the closest I got to was a goblin shark, but it had a duck-eyed human-sized shaped head. Most amazing was watching a meteor fall through a cloud then explode in green fireworks. One thing that's always fascinated me is bioluminescence. I've seen it in a number of different places, and it seems different every time. New England has very sparse greenish specks, whereas Southern California has very blue swirls. Coming out of the Canary Islands, you could shine a flashlight into the water for a minute, and when you turned it off, you'd see a very deep layer of lights. We were about 12 hours from Bermuda and I was on bow watch. I started seeing this very large, very deep shape, all sorts of lit up. It was just a somewhat nebulous shape, but it looked almost like a twisting prism. My best guess is it was some variety of siphonophore. These creatures are actually large colonies of little tiny animals and some species can get very large. Worked on a dive boat in Australia. Halfway out to the barrier reef looked outside and the ocean was completely calm. Not a single ripple. Didn't know that could happen. I love these threads. All 200 of them. This isn't too amazing but it was really cool at the time for me. While in Cape Cod, right off the shore of Nauset Beach near East Orleans about 7 years ago, I was on the family boat, a 24-foot grady white. We were sitting there looking at the seals in the water feeding on some sort of bait fish when we saw one of them split off the pack. Now, keep in mind that we were almost 100 yards away, so we were surprised to see that this seal was headed our way. He must have been very interested. It didn't take more than 30 seconds for this guy to come right up to the side of the boat we were on, and I kid you not, it just treaded water and looked at us for about 5 minutes. We were all taking pictures and talking to this kind visitor as most people would do, all while he calmly watched us. After we had put down our cameras and sat back down, still watching our new friend, he swam off and went back to his seal buddies to continue feeding. It was truly an amazing experience for myself. I grew up on the Florida Gulf Coast and had a Hobie cat on one of the bays. Used to sail my hubby out through the pass, out into the Gulf and down the barrier island a ways to where the tourist hotels were concentrated. A lot of the barrier island is undeveloped since it is owned by the nearby military base. A short ways off the beach in the undeveloped section I came upon a school flock pod of dolphins numbering in the hundreds. In that area, the dolphins are mainly bottlenose and usually are in pods of no more than a dozen. These looked smaller and there were more than I could count. Sailing my boat over through them, several larger dolphins stuck their tails into the air and slapped the water. Immediately the majority of the dolphins dove away from the surface, although we could see them moving along underneath. However, there was a small group that stayed on the surface, coming up to breath frequently. As we sailed by I could see one of them was giving birth, with the calf coming out just as we passed. The little one was about 2 feet long and immediately came up for air helped by another dolphin nearby. I was pulling in a massive squid on the surface, letting it de-ink. A huge black shape came out of the water and took it, and my favorite jig. I initially thought it was a shark as it was brutal. It was a nice, gentle dolphin. If I ever hear another woman tell me dolphins are beautiful or gentle, I'll point out my great white type experience with a dolphin. When I was a kid we used to get the hovercraft across the English Channel, which I hated, even more so after the particular day of the Force 9 gales. I remember waiting to board but being told that it was too rough for the crossing. Then eventually they said they'd do it, and we all got on. But instead of just being the usual 25 minutes, it took much longer because the hovercraft had to go along the English coast first to try and find a safe passage across the channel. I remember quite vividly the usually beautiful white cliffs of Dover careening up and down past the spray-covered porthole windows, feeling very ill.